Brayden Foster didn't expect to hate the sound of silence until his private helicopter landed near Lake Windmere. He stepped out onto the dock in designer boots that didn't belong anywhere near dirt, his crisp white shirt already wrinkling in the late summer humidity. The lake was quiet, too quiet. And for a man who ran a billion-dollar tech empire and hadn't taken a weekend off in over 3 years, the stillness was unsettling. "Sir, the cabin's fully stocked, fishing gear's inside. I'll be back Monday morning," his pilot said before taking off. Brayden didn't respond. He was already walking toward the rustic wooden cabin his assistant had booked, probably while rolling her eyes at the absurdity of this entire plan. "You need a break," she had said. "Go somewhere no one knows your name." Well, mission accomplished. No one here knew his name. No one here cared about conference calls, acquisition deals, or Forbes covers. And for the first time in years, Brayden Foster was completely alone, or so he thought. It wasn't until dusk, when he wandered down toward the dock with a beer in one hand and a fishing rod in the other, that he saw her. She was sitting on the edge of the neighboring dock, legs dangling over the water, a faded baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. Her rod was already cast, and next to her sat a small tackle box and a thermos. She glanced over. "You're holding that rod like it's going to attack you." Brayden raised an eyebrow. "I haven't fished since I was 10. "Well, then you're in for a frustrating weekend." She grinned and returned her focus to the water. "The fish here are picky." Her voice was smooth, low, like honey stirred into hot tea. Brayden took a step closer without realizing it. "I'm Brayden," he said. "Didn't ask," she replied, then tilted her head toward him, lips twitching. "But since you're offering, I'm Avery, Avery Jensen." The way she said it, like she wasn't trying to impress anyone, was weirdly refreshing. No last name recognition, no fake smiles, just Avery. He sat down a few feet from her. "You live around here?" "I run the local bait shop," she said. "And guide lake tours sometimes." Brayden blinked. Bait shop. Avery glanced at his Rolex and designer boots. "I'm guessing you're not from around here." "That obvious? Only someone who's never touched a worm wears a $5,000 watch to fish." He laughed, surprising himself. "You know watches?" "No, but I know people." "And you're definitely not here for the trout." Brayden opened his mouth to reply, but she cast her line again, and the moment passed. They fished in silence for a while. Well, she fished. He mostly untangled his line. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting gold across the water, Avery stood and stretched. "I'm heading back. If you want real bait, come by Jensen's Bait and Tackle tomorrow morning. I'll set you up." "Is that a sales pitch?" "Nope, that's me being neighborly." "You're a disaster out here." And then she was gone. Brayden stayed on the dock long after the stars came out, his line forgotten in the water. He didn't know why he couldn't stop thinking about her. Maybe it was the way she didn't care who he was, or the way she looked at the lake like it was home. Or maybe it was that, for the first time in a long time, someone had seen right through him and hadn't looked away. The next morning, he walked into the bait shop wearing jeans and a plain black tee. No watch, no designer labels, just him. Avery was behind the counter, her hair pulled back in a messy braid, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked up, surprised. "Didn't think you'd show." "I want a second chance to not embarrass myself." She slid a small container across the counter. "Live bait." "Don't drop it." He picked it up carefully. "Thanks. For yesterday." Avery leaned on the counter, studying him. "You're not like most people who come out here for the weekend." "Why's that?" "You're actually trying." Brayden was quiet for a moment. "Maybe I've been trying the wrong things for a long time." Avery didn't press. She just grabbed her keys and gestured toward the back door. "Come on, let's go catch you a fish." They spent the afternoon on her boat, an old aluminum thing with peeling paint and a cooler full of sandwiches. She taught him how to cast properly, how to bait a hook, and how to wait. He wasn't good at waiting, but with her beside him, laughing at his lack of patience and telling him stories about the lake, it didn't feel like wasted time. When he finally caught one barely bigger than his hand, she whooped like he'd won a championship. "You did it," she said, grinning. Your first Windmere catch. He looked at her, sunlight dancing across her cheeks, and something shifted inside him. It wasn't about the fish, it was her. That night, she invited him to a bonfire by the lake. Locals gathered with guitars and drinks, everyone barefoot and relaxed. No one asked what he did for a living. No one cared. He sat next to Avery, their shoulders brushing, and listened as she sang softly along to the music. "You really love it here, don't you?" he asked. She nodded. "It's the only place I've ever felt like myself." Brayden didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, "I think I've forgotten what that feels like." Avery looked at him, and this time she didn't joke or tease. "Maybe that's why you're here." He didn't sleep much that night, not because of the bugs or the creaky mattress, but because he couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she laughed, the way she made him feel like a person instead of a brand. He came to Lake Windmere for a break. But now, all he wanted was more time with the woman who made him forget he was a billionaire. By Sunday morning, Brayden had stopped checking his emails. The phone was still in his duffel bag, powered off and untouched since Friday night. He hadn't planned on staying past the weekend, but he also hadn't planned on Avery. She wasn't what he expected from a lakeside town. She didn't fill silences with small talk or ask questions she didn't want answers to. She had a way of looking at him like she saw past all the layers he'd built to keep people out, like she understood something silent in him he hadn't tried to explain. That morning, he found her on the porch of her small cottage near the woods, barefoot, and holding a paint-splattered mug of coffee. A canvas leaned against the railing, half-finished. It looked like a storm hovering above the lake, wild and unfiltered. "You painted that?" he asked as he stepped up. "Didn't buy it," she said, handing him the other mug. "Try not to spill." "That one's stronger than it looks." He took a sip and coughed. "What is this, rocket fuel? Dark roast? You city types take everything too mild." He leaned against the railing, eyeing the canvas. "You always paint storms," she tilted her head. "I paint what I feel." "Storms are easier than calm." Brayden didn't respond right away. Then, "Is that how you feel right now?" Avery glanced at him, then back at the canvas. "Not entirely." They finished their coffee in a quiet that felt less like absence and more like understanding. Later, she brought him down to a hidden inlet through a narrow trail behind her place. The trees bent low overhead and the lake opened up like a secret. There was a small wooden dock there, quieter than the others, tucked away from the usual paths. "No one else comes here?" he asked. "Not unless I bring them." He looked at her, surprised. "Then why did you bring me?" Avery crouched near the edge and dipped her fingers into the water. "Because you're not pretending to be someone you're not. Most people who pass through this town spend the whole time performing." He sat beside her, letting the stillness settle between them. "I used to be good at pretending," he said, staring out across the water. "But not anymore," he hesitated. "Lately, I don't know who the performance was for." She didn't ask for details. She just reached into the cooler she'd brought and tossed him a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Eat before you start sounding philosophical," he laughed, the sound catching him off guard. "You always this charming." "Only when I'm bribing people with food." The afternoon drifted by in lazy waves. They fished a little, talked when they felt like it, and let the silence fill the rest. She told him about the mural she'd painted on the side of the post office, about the time a bear wandered into town and got stuck in the bakery, and about the first time she realized she didn't want to leave Windmere. "I got accepted to an art school in Chicago," she said, tossing a pebble into the water. "Full scholarship. I went for 2 months. "What happened?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I wasn't built for concrete and deadlines. I missed the sky. And the quiet. You gave up a full ride for this." "I didn't give it up," she said evenly. "I chose something else." He studied her for a moment. "That's brave." "No," she replied. "It's honest." As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the trees, Brayden realized he hadn't once thought about Monday, or the board meeting, or the million things waiting for him back in New York. Avery stood and dusted off her hands. "Come on. There's something I want to show you." They hiked up a narrow path behind the inlet, roots snaking across the ground and leaves brushing their shoulders. At the top, the trees opened up to a clearing where an old fire tower stood, half rusted but still sturdy. "You're kidding," he said, looking up. "Nope. Best view of the lake, don't worry, it hasn't collapsed yet." They climbed in silence, the metal steps creaking under their weight. At the top, the wind was stronger and the world stretched out in every direction: blue water, dense forest, and the fading light casting everything in amber. Brayden leaned against the railing, breath caught in his chest. "It's incredible." Avery didn't say anything. She just watched him, her face unreadable. He turned to her. "You ever bring anyone else up here?" She shook her head. "No, why me?" "Because," she said simply, "you looked like you needed to remember what it feels like to breathe." He reached for her hand without thinking. She didn't pull away. The wind tugged at her braid, and for a moment the noise of the world faded until there was only the rustle of leaves and the echo of their joined silence. "You leave tomorrow," she said quietly. "Yeah, you going back to, whatever that life is," he hesitated. "I don't know yet." Avery looked at him, something flickering in her gaze. "You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that doesn't feel real." He didn't answer. Couldn't, because the truth was nothing about his life in the city had felt real in a long time. The boardrooms, the headlines, the constant pressure to be the man everyone believed he was. But here on a rusted tower above a quiet lake with a woman who painted storms and handed him coffee like it was a dare, he felt more grounded than he had in years. As they climbed down, dusk folding around them, Brayden knew something had shifted. He just didn't know what it meant yet. After they returned to her place, she handed him a folded piece of watercolor paper. "What's this?" "Open it when you get back to the cabin." He tucked it into his jacket without asking why. That night, as crickets sang and the stars blinked awake, he unfolded the paper on the porch of his rental cabin. It was a painting, small but vivid. A man standing at the edge of the lake, his reflection rippling in the water. Above him, the sky was calm, and at the bottom, in small, careful lettering, "Sometimes the quiet is where you find yourself." He sat there for a long time, staring at the painting. And when he finally went inside, he didn't pack. The morning fog clung low over the lake as Brayden stood barefoot on the porch, watching the mist drift across the water like a secret being kept. He hadn't slept. Not because of restlessness, but because the decision he'd been avoiding all weekend had begun to settle in his chest with an unbearable weight. He hadn't packed, hadn't touched his phone. And now, Sunday was slipping into Monday like it didn't care about his boardroom obligations or the six-figure contracts waiting in his inbox. By the time the fog began to lift, he was already walking the dirt path toward Avery's cottage. She was kneeling in the garden beside her porch, pulling weeds with one hand and balancing a basket of herbs with the other. Her hair was tucked beneath a faded bandana and her jeans were smeared with soil. "You're still here," she said without looking up. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye." "Fair enough," she muttered, brushing dirt from her palms. "Most people don't bother with that part." "I'm not most people." She stood, wiping her hands on a towel slung over the railing. "No, you're not." Brayden hesitated. "I read what you wrote." Avery picked up the basket. "Didn't write it for you to say anything. Just figured you'd understand it better after being here a few days." "I didn't just understand it," he said. "I felt it." She paused, her fingers tightening around the handle. "So what now?" "You go back to the city and forget this place exists?" "I don't know." "Then why are you here?" "Because I needed to see you again before I did anything." Avery stepped back toward the porch, setting the basket down with more force than necessary. "I don't want a goodbye that feels like an apology." "It's not an apology." "Then what is it?" Brayden's voice dropped. "A promise I'm trying to figure out how to keep." She looked at him, the sharpness in her gaze tempered by something softer. "You don't owe me anything. We barely know each other." "I know enough," he said. "You're not afraid to choose peace over ambition. You see people for who they are, not what they can give you. You made me remember who I was before I started measuring my life by quarterly earnings." Her expression shifted, uncertain now. That's a lot to put on a weekend. It's a lot to feel in one, he replied quietly. She crossed her arms but didn't turn away. You think you can live like this? Chop firewood, fix leaky pipes, make dinner without a reservation? I don't know if I can. But I want to try. Avery raised an eyebrow. You seriously think trading skyscrapers for a bait shop is your answer? He stepped closer. I think being near you might be. A silence stretched between them, not awkward but charged with the weight of unspoken things. Then she exhaled slowly and shook her head. You really don't know how to ease into anything, do you? I've spent too long easing into the wrong lives. Avery picked up the basket again and turned toward the house. I'm going to make tea. You can either come inside or stand there making dramatic declarations until the mosquitoes eat you alive. He followed her in. The inside of her cottage smelled like cedar and lemon balm. Books lined the windowsills instead of shelves, and a small radio played something bluesy from the kitchen counter. She moved easily through the space, boiling water, slicing lemon, and pouring honey into 2 mugs without asking if he liked any of it. You ever stop working? He asked, watching her stir. I don't consider living the same as working, he leaned against the doorframe. I've been doing it backwards, you and most of the world. They drank tea on the porch, watching the sunlight break through the trees. Avery didn't ask about his company or what would happen if he didn't show up to the meeting that morning. She didn't need to. I've been thinking about the land up near the northern ridge, she said after a while. There's an old boathouse that's falling apart. I've always wanted to turn it into something useful, maybe a studio. Brayden glanced at her. Then why haven't you? Because it takes money I don't have, and time I can't borrow. What if you had both? She narrowed her gaze. I'm not looking for a handout. I'm not offering one, he said. I'm offering a partnership. Avery looked at him, studying the lines of his face like she was trying to see past the man and into the intention. Why me? She asked. Because you've been building something real out here. And I want to be a part of it, not just a visitor. Her hands were still wrapped around the mug, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. You don't even know what you're agreeing to. Then tell me. I wake up before sunrise. I fix things with duct tape and stubbornness. I spend more time with fish than people, and I don't do long-distance anything. Brayden nodded slowly. Then I won't be long-distance, she blinked. You're serious. I called my assistant before I came over, he said. Told her I'm taking an indefinite leave. The company can survive without me. Avery stared at him like she wasn't sure whether to kiss him or demand a psych evaluation. You're giving it all up. No, he said. I'm trading it in. There's a difference. She set her mug down. You don't even know if this will work. Nothing worth having comes with a guarantee. He expected her to argue, to push him away, to call him reckless. Instead, she stepped closer and rested her hand lightly on his chest. Then you better learn to fish properly, she said. Because around here, that's how we bond, he grinned. I'll need a lot of lessons. I charge by the hour. He took her hand. I can afford it, she laughed, and this time it wasn't cautious or guarded. It was full and bright like she believed him. As the sun rose higher and the lake shimmered in the distance, Brayden realized something he hadn't dared to admit until now. He hadn't come to Windmere to escape. He'd come to begin. The sound of hammering echoed across the lake as Brayden adjusted the beam on his shoulder. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and sawdust clung to his jeans. The boathouse renovation had begun 3 weeks ago, and though his hands were blistered and every muscle ached, there was a quiet satisfaction in the work that no boardroom had ever given him. Avery walked up the slope with 2 lemonades, her boots crunching over dry twigs. She handed him one, brushing hair off her cheek with her forearm. You cut the angle wrong on that support beam, she said, nodding toward the frame. I followed the measurements exactly, Brayden replied, taking a long sip. You sure your tape measure isn't gaslighting me? My tape measure has more experience than you do, she said, climbing onto the low platform they'd built the previous day. You're going to have to redo it. Brayden wiped his brow with the hem of his shirt. You know, I used to pay people 6 figures to never tell me I was wrong. Avery crouched beside the beam and looked up at him. And now you've got a woman with dirt under her nails telling you to pick up the saw again. I've never been more motivated, he said, setting his lemonade down and grabbing the drill. They worked side by side until the sun dipped low through the pines, casting long streaks of amber across the water. The new window frame they'd installed glowed with the last light of evening, overlooking the lake like it had always belonged there. Avery leaned against the half-finished wall and stretched her arms above her head. You're lucky the weather's held. If we'd started this in October, you'd be wearing gloves so thick you couldn't hold a nail. I'd still be here, Brayden said, tapping the edge of the frame. Gloves or not, she glanced at him, eyes thoughtful. You don't miss it, the chaos, the pace. He didn't answer right away. Then he picked up a level and placed it on the beam, watching the bubbles settle into place. I thought I would, he said. But every day I wake up and don't have a calendar screaming appointments at me, I breathe easier. Avery walked across the platform, her steps light. People keep asking when you're going to leave. Are you? She shrugged. Not my business, but they're curious. You're not exactly subtle, Brayden. You may have ditched the watch, but you still look like a man who used to own half of Manhattan, he laughed. Only a quarter. Well, she said, stepping closer, you've got paint in your hair now, so you're adjusting. Brayden reached up instinctively, then dropped his hand. You could have told me that earlier. I could have, she said, her smile tilting, but then I wouldn't have gotten to watch you try to impress the mayor with a blue streak on your forehead, he groaned. No wonder she kept looking at me like I'd lost my mind. Avery sat on the edge of the dock they'd extended, letting her legs dangle over the water. She actually said she hasn't seen you smile this much since you arrived. He joined her, the boards creaking under his weight. That's because I wasn't smiling much before I met you. She didn't respond right away. The lake lapped gently at the edge, the breeze lifting strands of her hair. You know, she said finally, when you first showed up I thought you were a flight risk. Because of the boots. No, she said, glancing sideways, because you looked like someone who didn't know how to stay still. And now, you still don't know how to stay still, she said. But at least now you're not running from something, you're running toward it. Brayden reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He handed it to her without a word. She opened it slowly. It was a sketch, charcoal on thick paper. The boathouse, mid-construction, with her standing on the dock. Her face wasn't detailed, just the outline of her frame, the arc of her shoulders, the wind in her hair. You drew this. I needed a break from spreadsheets, he said. She traced the lines with her thumb. It's beautiful. I wanted to remember this exactly as it is, he said. Before it's finished, before it becomes something, her gaze lifted to meet his. It already is something. They sat together in silence, the kind that wrapped around them like a blanket instead of a wall. Brayden cleared his throat. I have something else. Avery raised an eyebrow. Is this going to be another sketch? No, he said, pulling a box from under the bench. This one's a little heavier. She opened it slowly. Inside was a set of keys tied with a strip of leather. She looked up. What is this? I bought the land beside the boathouse. It's yours. Her expression changed. Brayden, you wanted a studio. Now you'll have space to build one. On your terms. Her voice was quiet. You didn't need to do that. I didn't do it because I needed to, he said. I did it because I wanted to be part of your story, not rewrite it, just build something next to it. She closed the box carefully and stood up. You're impossible. I've been called worse. She stepped in front of him, her face unreadable. You know what I need more than a studio, he shook his head. Someone who doesn't leave when the first storm hits. I'm not going anywhere, Avery. People always say that. He reached for her hand. Then let me show you. She looked down at their joined fingers, then back up. Okay, she whispered. The wind picked up, rustling the trees as twilight deepened around them. Brayden pulled something else from his pocket, a ring, simple and elegant, with a stone the color of lake water. She stared at it, her breath catching just slightly. I didn't plan this, he said. But nothing about this has gone according to plan. I came here for quiet. I found you instead, and I don't want to go another day without knowing you're mine." Her eyes glistened. "You sure you want to propose in a half-built boathouse smelling like pine and sweat?" "It's perfect," he said. "Because it's ours." She didn't wait. She kissed him, hands tangled in his shirt, the lake behind them and the future right in front. When they broke apart, she leaned her forehead against his. "Then let's build something real," and they did. The scent of cut lumber and wild mint floated through the air as Brayden stepped back from the finished boathouse, his hands dusted with saw residue and his jaw tight with concentration. The final hinge clicked into place on the window he'd just installed, and sunlight poured through the glass, warming the newly polished floors. Avery stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a faint glimmer of pride flickering in her eyes. "You leveled the trim." He wiped his hands on a cloth. "You were right about the measurements. Again." She walked in, running her fingers along the smooth frame of the workbench he'd built near the back wall. "You're starting to pick up a few things." Brayden leaned against the support beam, watching her walk the length of the room, pausing to admire the little details: the hand-forged hooks, the rows of labeled drawers for brushes and charcoal, the skylight cut into the roof that bathed the space in golden light. "It's yours now," he said, "every inch." Avery turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You've done more than I ever asked for." "I didn't do it to impress you." "I know," she said softly. She walked over to the window and opened it, letting in a breeze that fluttered the canvas sheets hung on the far wall. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been thinking about what it means to share a life with someone." Brayden tilted his head. "And it's not about what they give you. It's about how much space they make for your dreams to exist next to theirs." She looked at him. "You didn't just make space, you built it." He crossed the room to her and took her hands in his. "You gave up a city of possibilities once for something real. I want to build this life because it's honest, because it's not built on noise and achievement. It's built on us, and I've never wanted anything more." "I don't want to be a chapter in your escape," she said. "You're not," he said. "You're the person I ran toward when I realized every other life felt wrong." Her eyes searched his. "Then let's stop waiting." Brayden's brow furrowed slightly. "For what?" "For some perfect timing," she said. "The studio's done, the lake's warm. And I don't see a reason to keep planning when the only thing I want is already standing in front of me." He felt his heart jolt in his chest. "Are you saying?" "I want to marry you here," she said, voice steady. "In this place we built together." There weren't any preparations, no formal announcements, no guest lists. Just the two of them, standing barefoot on the dock that evening, the lake still and glassy beneath the soft glow of lanterns strung from the trees. Avery wore a simple dress, ivory linen that moved like water around her knees. Brayden wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the top button undone. His hair was still damp from the lake, and her fingers were stained faintly with charcoal from a last-minute sketch she'd tucked into her pocket. "I don't have vows written," she said, eyes locked on his. "Neither do I," he said. "Good," she whispered. "Let's just speak the truth." He took her hands, his voice thick with emotion. "You reminded me that my life isn't about what I built, but who I build it with. You're my truth, Avery, my beginning and my anchor." She blinked back tears, her tone unwavering. "You made me believe that love doesn't have to feel like sacrifice, that it can feel like home. I want every storm, every still morning, every paint-stained afternoon with you." He kissed her then, as the sun dipped behind the pines and the lantern swayed gently above them. And in that moment, there was no past to outrun, no future to fear, just the steady, undeniable rhythm of two hearts choosing each other. The next morning, the town buzzed with the news. Sheriff Dean tipped his hat with a knowing grin at the market. The bakery left a box of lemon scones at their doorstep without a name. Even the mayor, who rarely left her porch, wandered down to the bait shop and handed Avery a bouquet of wildflowers. Later that week, the boathouse officially opened as Windmere Studio. Locals and travelers alike came to see the gallery wall that featured rotating pieces stormy, vibrant, quiet, and bold. Each one signed simply, AJ, Brayden didn't return to the city. Instead, he helped expand the studio, adding a second floor with a view of the northern ridge, where they sometimes sat in the evenings with mugs of tea, sketching in silence or sharing stories they'd never told anyone else. Their days fell into rhythm: early sunrises, long walks through the woods, lakeside dinners with fish they'd caught themselves. Brayden learned how to patch a canoe and repair a cracked window pane. Avery taught him how to read the sky for storms, how to find the quiet in the chaos. They never stopped building, not just walls and windows, but a life full of intention. Of laughter and arguments and soft apologies. Of paint on his shirts and sawdust in her hair. Of shared breakfasts and lingering looks across the dock. And when they finally welcomed a daughter just before the first snowfall, her name, a blend of sky and earth, they wrapped her in a blanket stitched with pine trees and stars, and told her the story of how love found them not in a ballroom or a boardroom, but in the stillness of the lake. And how they chose it, every day, without hesitation, without regret. Because sometimes the quiet isn't the absence of a life, it's the beginning of the one you were always meant to live.